Good evening. Let's start with this closing of the Fifth European Forum. We would like to start by highlighting the importance that the foundations have in this time of ideological fight. We have to defeat the most reactionary ways of thinking, and that's why we are inviting different European foundations. We have with us Barbara Steiner from Transform Europe. This is a foundation, this is an umbrella foundation made up with 38 foundations. You have the floor.
Thank you all. Actually, I want to start my contribution with thanking the organizers, thanking all the speakers here, all the audience. I want to excuse also that there was not enough time for debate sometime, but I want to thank everybody who prepared the content here. But I also want to thank everybody who prepared the very good atmosphere for networking, for talking to each other between the sessions. I want to thank the technical staff, which did a great job, an amazing job. And I want to thank the interpreters who also delivered the precondition for the possibility to communicate and understand each other. So thank you all very much. This forum is a starting point. We hope and we want to deepen and exchange our analysis. We want to formulate common recommendations, common policies. We are working on different topics. I can tell now for Transform, just highlight 3 topics. We are working on the ecological, democratic, productive transformation, which was mentioned quite a lot of times. I should state we have to get rid of the Stability and Growth Pact in Europe. It must not come back. We are working on a left security concept. We explore not only how security as a term is discussed and instrumentalized by the far right, but also what a left security concept could mean. We are recognizing that everyone has a right to safety and free life to develop themselves. We need to criticize NATO and equally the aims of developing an Euro army. And we have to say no to a new Cold War against Russia and China. We had 2 weeks ago the 5th International Marx Fem Conference taking place online. There we heard, as we did also today, not only a lot about necessary and also successful struggles for women's rights, for legalization of abortion, for the struggle against violence against women. We understand also gender relations as relations of production. So without with understanding the so-called reproduction also as production of life. Our whole societal systems in capitalism are based on exploitation of labor, paid and unpaid, and of nature, human and non-human. We are a foundation. I thank you all very much for the honor to be so prominent now speaking at the closing of this session. We were very delighted to have also the FEPS and the JEF, so the foundation of the Socialist Party and the foundation of the Green Party here. We want to build bridges and not only with the other foundations, with the political parties, also with academics, NGOs, civil societies, unions, activists, and social movements. A new hegemony needs a broader cooperation amongst us. We are a foundation and network, and also room for debates and dialogue on a big variety of topics. So we have a leverage to move beyond in topics that may be tricky for a political party to tackle. Please make use of us. Please use our room of dialogue to develop together analysis. Let's see this forum as a starting point to stay in contact. The philosophers and we have interpreted the world. We have to reinterpret it. We have to unite in Europe and globally, and we have to change the world. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Barbara. We take up the challenge that she describes. Now I would like to give the floor to Landberg. He is a very powerful voice in the European Union, and he's going to be online with us. He is the president of the Green European Foundation. He's going to share his thoughts with us. Thank you very much. László, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. And it's really a pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, I cannot be there in person, but I'm glad that the technology allows for my participation. I can confirm that for FEPS, this is a very important dialogue between foundations, and we have a lot of shared concern about the state and the future of the European Union. FEPS is a foundation of a large network, over 40 members across Europe, but also beyond. We have members also in Israel, as well as the United States of America. And now at the end of the year, we are already planning the next one. We have been setting thematic priorities for 2022, and I think it very much matches the interest and the orientation of the participants of this conference, since the main concern is, of course, the recovery. What kind of recovery the European Union can experience after this disruption caused by the coronavirus? We are not only thinking about this in economic terms, although the economy is obviously at the center stage, but the main concern is the quality of this recovery, how green it can be, how well it can be reconciled with the very ambitious objectives towards sustainability, and also how well it can take advantage of the new technology, the digitalization, on which probably Europeans are a little bit lagging behind other parts of the world. But there are many signs that a big boost to innovation and investment in the new technologies, access on an equal opportunity basis, could indeed improve the quality of our work and the quality of our life. The recovery also needs to lead us to a more social Europe, a genuinely social one. Exactly 4 years ago, the European leaders proclaimed the so-called social pillar. And I think many of us are disappointed by the slow motion in terms of the real action that followed this social pillar. Earlier this year, nevertheless, there was a so-called action plan presented by the European Commission, discussed by leaders in Porto, but not much have been heard since Porto about this very important social action plan. So there are many reasons to be concerned whether the EU can just talk the talk or also walk the walk. what concerns greater solidarity and social cohesion, the promotion of social rights in our society. FEPS very actively participates in the Conference on the Future of Europe, and we actually produced a volume of studies under the title Our European Future. You can download it for free on the FEPS website. In this volume, we also stress the importance of integrating new proposals, qualitative leaps in terms of social integration, as well as the need to meet the climate objectives and turn the so-called Green Deal into a real change maker. I think we will discuss various aspects of the European integration in this panel. I would like to just highlight three aspects. If the question is whether the European Union managed to learn from previous crises. The first question regarding the crisis response is solidarity. In my view, on this account, there has been a lot of progress as compared to the previous crisis. In the response to the 2020 shock, by launching short-time work arrangements, almost doubling the European Union budget represents a big leap forward. Or if the question, nevertheless, is the recovery, if we look ahead, the jury is still out, because it's not only about the recovery budget of the European Union, but also the reform of the fiscal rules. We heard it in the introduction that the Stability and Growth Pact is an outdated one, and there is a big battle, and next year it's going to be an absolutely decisive battle, whether these fiscal rules can be replaced by something more sensible, which allows for economic growth, investment, what is needed for people, including social investment, and meeting the needs of the people first, and at the same time, of course, trying to keep together the economic architecture of this community. And the last point which we need to evaluate is the question of global responsibility. That's probably the weakest link here. The recent rise of new variants of the coronavirus probably proved that the European, but also the North American support to the rest of the world in terms of tackling the coronavirus has been absolutely insufficient, and this deficit has to be overcome if we don't want further waves to hit Europe, but just simply to ensure that this global pandemic is tackled on the basis of global cooperation and global solidarity between peoples. Thank you very much.
Gracias, László.
Thank you very much, László. And last but not least, we have with us Ioana from the Green European Foundation, who's going to talk about her foundation. Ilona, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Similarly to László, I really regret not being able to be there with you today. And I thank the organizers of this event for the amazing work and sessions that we could attend over the past couple of days. At the Green European Foundation, as we are approaching the midpoint of this European Parliament mandate, we find it a very interesting stepping stone to have a look at where Europe is at, and more importantly, which direction are we going towards. I will also highlight three topics that we are focusing on and that we plan to work on in the upcoming year, and tell you some of the approaches that we have moving ahead. I hope that they will resonate. Hearing the speakers before me, I'm sure they will. The first one is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. We have heard a lot of reflections around the impact of the pandemic, but the real impact is yet difficult to estimate. And we are not even seeing an ending in sight. Confinement and more generally pandemic rules, pandemic regulations and pandemic politics have affected some of the most vulnerable groups in our societies. The Greens EFA group in the parliament launched a poll recently, and perhaps unsurprisingly, we found that poverty and social inequality is the #1 concern of European citizens at the moment. So with this in mind, the Green European Foundation will focus through its work on the critical aspects of a post-pandemic Europe. And we will, as some of our partner foundations present here today, also look at fiscal rules. We will look at cooperation on vaccines and especially access to vaccines in the Global South. We will look at the recovery plan with some of the worries we have on how recovery plans might be instrumentalized by corrupt governments. But most importantly, we also want to check the fundamental or engage in a fundamental critique on our health systems in Europe and start to imagine the much needed new models for healthcare in the European Union. The second topic that I want to touch upon is climate change and the need for a just transition. I mean, the effects of climate change are making it really difficult for even the most skeptical voices to be heard. I think that we have seen throughout the past year, half of Europe was on fire while the other half was drowning. And climate is now a mainstream debate. With the recovery funds, with the Next Generation EU, we see climate fight against climate change taking central stage at European level. And yet, look at what happened at COP26. The final declaration has really missed the mark, and it has been welcomed by some countries in the Global South short of a death sentence. So at the Green European Foundation, we are building a vision and narrative for a just transition in Europe. We want a green future that doesn't only focus on technological transformation. Yes, that's needed. But we also want to see a really crucial change in how we produce, how we consume, and how we organize our societies in Europe. And in doing so, we want to pay particular attention to what the just transition can look like in the south and east of Europe, where different topics are at the center stage of the debate on a national level, but also at what a just transition can sound and mean in rural areas and in post-industrial communities. And finally, I want to talk to you about democracy. We have heard from multiple speakers in this event about the gloomy situation in various countries in Europe and across the world. We see governments which are taking free rein and restricting social and human rights. We see, imposing rules that actually make it difficult for us to see free speech or free media. And the list continues. So at GEF, we really want to focus on fighting for and supporting democracy in Europe and addressing the anti-democratic movements, politics, political trends, especially in the context of COVID. But I also want to close by saying that we really don't feel alone. Yes, there are huge challenges with a lot of authoritarian far-right forces gaining traction. But we have also seen progressive forces. We see movements in the past few years that are ignited changes that we didn't think possible just maybe a few years back. So in a world that is no longer split in the old cleavages, where we don't think necessarily, religion, laicism, or state market, progressives and conservatives, I think it's really important for all of us as political foundations to talk to each other, but also see who are our allies in society. We need to understand how to connect with different movements. And even when we don't agree 100% on everything, pick the topics that we do agree on and where we do speak the same language. So we want a progressive left future in Europe, and we don't want to work in silos. And with this, I'm delighted to see the work that you have been doing. And I hope that it's only one of the many bridges that you were talking about, Barbara, that we can actually build between our foundations that will help us to, move towards a more progressive future in the European Union. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful evening for the rest.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Ioana. And we are very satisfied to have been able to host this meeting, to have these three foundations with us, and to bridge gaps and build bridges. I would like to close this session by thanking the role of the foundations in this ideological fight. And now we are going to present the different works done by the assemblies and panels throughout these 2 exhausting days. We are going to start by panel order. So the first panel is going to be the report of the first panel is going to be presented by Marta. Marta, go ahead.
¿Sí? Bien. Bueno, yo en primer lugar quería volver a dar las gracias a los panelistas de ayer y a todo el público también por...
First of all, I would like to thank the panelists and the audience for having been with us during the first panel yesterday. I would like to thank everyone for attending the meeting, as well as the interpreters for being here. Well, I think that the positions of the panelists were very clear yesterday. The panel was talking about the big challenges for the future of Europe. We see that the pandemic has worsened the precariousness of workers and has worsened climate change. The biggest international pharmaceuticals have utilized the pandemic. And what can we do? We can strengthen the democracy. We can oppose to the far right in Europe. We need a new deal for a sustainable development. We have to question the production model, and we have to work on a left deal after the but resolution that was adopted at COP26. We need to improve the healthcare systems. We have to tax more the big companies. We have to protect better the rights of workers and migrants. We have to focus on the fact that big corporations are benefiting from the pandemic and not the plain citizens. We have to support different initiatives like the right to cure one. We have to exit the pandemic, but we cannot make the laws for workers more precarious. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marta. Now it's the turn of Caterina Anastasio, which is going to talk about the second panel.
Bien, os ponemos deberes y la relatoría deben de trabajar esta semana para mandarnos.
So they will have to send us in writing what they're presenting now, what they've just presented.
Before starting, I would like to thank also our co-president, Cornelia Hildebrandt, that did all the work organizing the panel and finally could not be present due to her health. So in the panel, we tried to create a space for political dialogue and exchange, creating bridges for convergence around the topic of democracy. There was an agreement during the panel that democracy is more than just representative parliamentary democracy, and that in order to expand it and protect it, we need to be very aware. We heard about Greece and how, although the neo-Nazi Golden Dawn Party, for example, has collapsed and its leadership is in jail, still we have governments incorporating the far-right policies in their everyday politics. And it is a trend that is seen all over Europe, and we need to be very aware of that and fight back neo-fascism. We heard about economic democracy, social equality, and the need of thinking gender democracy as well as the basis of all the convergence we strive. The handling of financial and political crisis showed that global financial capitalism cannot be a solution and is not capable of bringing democratic solutions. We heard that the system is not legitimized by the people, and we emphasized the role of the civic society. We talked about bottom-up democracy, participatory democracy, representative democracy, but also about redistribution not only of wealth, but also power and democratic power within the workspaces and within our parties. We talked about intellectual property, we talked about the commons, the need, particularly now visible with COVID, to release the patents and make technology something that serves all the people, not profit, not capital. Talking about economic democracy and redistribution, we heard it's not necessarily nationalization, but rather a socialization of the means of production. We talked about peace, security, safety, and the fact that they are more than the absence of violence and war. We talked about the dangers of militarization and their nexus to undemocratic, let's say, behavior of states. We talked also about the military, we heard about the military industry and the military-industrial complex that fuel war, injustice, but also are a major factor for climate change. We heard about the ecological question. We were reminded that the ecological question is also a class question, but it's also a survival question for the human race. We heard about the introduction of ecocide as a term, or how it was very successfully said, I think, ecological suicide, and the need to start talking about ways out of this crisis. We heard about refugees, migrants, and the lack of representation for all people that are non-citizens in Europe. And we talked about particularly the fact that the refugee and migrant issue is not a moral question, but rather an everyday class struggle. All in all, we agreed that we need a new concept, a new story, describing not only the state of the world, but also common futures that we're able to imagine together. So as the panel showed, convergence is possible. We in Transform will continue working on that. And yes, the last thing I would like to say is check out our webpage, www.transform-network.net. Thanks.
Gracias, Caterina. Y tendría la palabra Jesús Hernández, que nos plantearía el panel número 3.
I give the floor now to the rapporteur for the third panel.
Yes, hello. Yeah, I will explain briefly the conclusions of the panel on climate change. Well, first I would like to explain that we're very proud that the composition of the panel itself was very representative on what are the profile that we need in this forum. So we have voices from Southern Europe, from Eastern Europe, we have voices from Belgium, we had political parties that are in government, political parties that are in opposition, and I think that really enriches the debate. And also we had the voice of the Global South, and I think it's very important to have this voice represented here in the forum, and especially when we're talking about climate justice. I would like to share a little summary of the highlights of the speakers that we had in the panel. First, Hervé Bramy, our moderator, that of course he framed the debate, and he was very strong on his statement, saying that we cannot leave in the hands of the market only the solutions to climate change. We need solidarity, and we need to, as progressive forces, have a strong role to find the alternative. Sakia Katabi, the federal minister in Belgium, she explained something very interesting, that the original scene on her view of the Paris Agreement is that it basically leaves in the hands of the member states all the action points, all the concrete action. At the same time, she was defending the space of the COPs, because it's the only global forum where we also have the voices from the South represented. Diego Pari, who came from New York to be with us in this event, he talked basically about two issues. First, about democracy, second, about justice. While talking about democracy, he was very clear that his political party they managed to defeat once again fascism, and this time they did it more clearly than ever. They did it in the ballot boxes, and I think that's a strong example for all of us. His second point is that we cannot have the same responsibility. We have a common but differentiated responsibility between developing and industrialized countries. I think it was very interesting that he said that rich countries must accept that we have a historical responsibility. Rossella Muroni, MP from Italy, he basically talked about planet, prosperity, and people. He said that if the EU was created for the need to manage altogether the coal and steel, now it's a moment where climate change should replace this and should be at the very core of the action of the European Union. And to do that, she was very strong, saying that the only way to move forward towards climate justice is to end austerity. Ursula, MP from Poland, she explained the importance of alternative narrative to counterbalance the conservatives. On this regard, she was very strong, saying that we should explain the job creation capacity of renewable energy, circular economy, to have an interesting narrative, especially to working class people. And finally, Andreu, he was very clear. I think he was the clearest voice, sharing the disappointment of the concept of the agreement of Glasgow. He was very strong, saying that was not enough and was a big disappointment. And also, it was worrying how the member states are incoherent with scientific evidence. At the same time, he highlighted that the ecological transition is going to be much more than technological solution. It's going to be much more than a change of socket, and we'll need a cultural change. So that's all from my part. If I have to summarize in one sentence, I think that the panelists, they share that we need climate actions and we need it now. So thank you very much and see you next year.
Gracias, Jesús. A continuación tendría la palabra.
I give the floor to Jean-Pierre Michel, who was responsible for reporting about the Culture Assembly about culture.
Voilà, le thème
The topic that was chosen for the Culture Assembly was the social dimension of culture. We had three panelists, two through Zoom and one who is still with us today, coming from Finland, and I'd like to thank you, of course, for having traveled to be with us. Now, the discussion we had has shown, I think, that the pandemic has, generally speaking, made the precarious life of artists even more complicated and difficult. And this, of course, totally, I would say, contradicts the very positive role that artists have played during the pandemic. We also insisted on the fact that culture has to be considered as a common good. It is one of the clear facts, I think, that we agreed on. We said that culture is everywhere in life. It brings people together and it unites individuals. And this was mentioned in particular by one of our panel members, a migrant Malaysian who lives in the UK. In the various interventions we heard, we saw that there are enormous differences between workers active in the cultural sector, depending on whether they are organized or not. If they are members of artist associations or trade union organizations, their situation is very different. The status of artists, which is which is a reality in some countries, is totally absent in some other countries. Now, what about the actions for the future? We decided, even though this is not new, we want to dedicate some effort to obtain that 2% of our GDP is dedicated to culture. This is a demand. I say it's not new because, yes, it's already been mentioned, including through a resolution adopted by the European Parliament, with the only opposition of the extreme right, by the way. So 2% of the GDP dedicated to culture. Second, a European status for artists. As I said, some countries have established a status for their artists, which makes their lives a little bit easier, but not everybody has such a status. So it is important to think about potentially establishing some sort of European status to ensure that all artists are well treated or better treated. And then we finished with a short movie, which was produced by our friends from Hungary, a short movie that has clearly demonstrated that culture can be used to identify, make visible, and denounce certain unacceptable situations, including, in this case, the living conditions of a Roma group in a small, very poor and deprived area of Hungary. And I want to thank, of course, all the panel members and also thank our interpreters who helped us during the discussion. Let's now give the floor to Vincenzo for the Youth Assembly.
Hi, everybody. Dear comrades, we are happy to report from a very productive Youth Assembly under the topic of democracy in a post-pandemic world. To ensure everyone gets a chance to speak for themselves, we separated the Assembly into 4 tables to discuss 4 different aspects of democracy. Among other things, we discussed topics such as self-determination, the relationship between individual choices and collective action, the threat of far-right movements in Europe, and the rights of the youth in Europe. I don't need to tell you how important the question of democracy is in the current crisis within the European Union. But one aspect took our special interest. The democracies of Western Europe reflect numerous contradictions that affect the lives of the younger generation. After our discussion, one thing seems to be clear across all perspectives. The current problems must be answered with European activism, including online formats, as well as the organization of actions on the local level. But how do we do that? The answer is, we need a common space to encourage discussion with youth organizations from all over Europe. We need spaces to verify our work, to rethink activism, understanding what has worked and what has not, to achieve a single goal, to push people to change the material conditions in which they live. A space for comparison would allow us to map the main problems, have a common toolbox that collects information, proposals, and useful analysis to each organization to try to change society. We thank the organizers of European Forum for giving us a first taste of this 2021 Youth Assembly. We need to strengthen the rights that are already granted to the youth. We need to increase the level of solidarity with workers, with students, with the weakest, aiming at the common declaration by the European youth. Young people are the future, and we will not allow a future of exploitation and precariousness. We want a better life, and we want to do it together with the young people of Europe. Thus, the Youth Assembly has given the European Left Youth Network a mission for the next year. It's our aim to build a campaign by the European youth that can deepen our understanding of these issues. A campaign whose state of implementation can be witnessed at the next European Forum. But creating this campaign requires a strong youth network and the creation of a larger space of discussion to debate the state of our democracies and the needs of our generation. Let's give our democracies the right antibodies against a future of exploitation, precariousness, and individualism. We can obtain these antibodies fighting for our rights and together with the European youth. For this, we ask humbly for your support. Thank you all.
Gracias Vicenzo. A continuación, Cristina.
Thank you. Let's continue now with the next report from the Women's Assembly, please.
Bueno, en la Asamblea Feminista lo que se ha tratado.
The Women's Assembly has focused specifically on how the far right is attacking the rights of women. And during that assembly, we've actually divided our time into two sections or two times. One with extremely valuable speakers who have taken the floor to tell us about the various realities in their countries and how women's rights are being attacked and challenged. We've been told that fundamental rights of women are being systematically attacked, and in certain countries, where the left is more present, maybe policies are being implemented that are, well, trying at least to protect the rights of women and trying to improve their situation. And so, another, I would say, side of what may be happening in other countries, or the opposite of what can happen in other countries. Now, we've also said that the left, in general, should support and encourage those policies that fight inequalities and eradicate macho violence and abuses against women in general. We also said we need to oppose the extreme right male-orientated policies. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused and I can't read my notes. Maybe with the glasses it's going to be a bit easier. We also need to fight against all the types of violence that women are facing, from the sexual violence to the economic violence, the financial one, the social ones. We, as women, suffer from exploitation, discrimination on the basis of gender, on the basis of our origin, on the basis of, for example, our migrant status, and migrant women, we were told, were heavily impacted by all sorts of violence. We also said that in countries like Andorra, a country that presents itself as a wonderful country in terms of tourism, is a country that constantly intimidates women and challenges the human rights of women, with the complicity of both Spain and France, two countries that for years now are not really interested or showing any real interest in those acts of violence. And we've also mentioned abortion, the fact that a lot of women are affected by a lack of access to that right, and the fact that many women in Andorra, but also in other countries, and in countries like Belgium, are facing a situation where abortion is questioned. And this is happening, including here in Brussels, which is supposed to be the capital city of Europe. We also denounce the fact that we still have 6 countries in the EU, 6 member countries of the EU, that have not ratified the Istanbul Convention, which is the very basis of any effective combat or battle against macho violence. We need to make sure that our states act to ensure that women's lives are protected. We also need to fight for the wage gap to be filled. We need equality in terms of wages and salaries. We need policies also that will contribute to creating jobs for women, put an end to underground illegal jobs, and also ensure that there is a better distribution of unpaid work between men and women and a better balance. We also need to demand free, safe abortion. These needs to be part of our constitutions because they are a fundamental right for women. Thank you.
Gracias, Cristina. Y finalmente, para terminar.
Thank you, Cristina. Last workshop, the Trade Union Assembly has the floor for its report.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not quite sure whether you are aware of the way trade unions usually meet. In any meeting of trade unions, the beginning of everything is who was there, and we were 25 from 16 different trade unions. And it's always essential for any trade union meeting to start by saying who was there and where we were from. So 25, 16 trade unions. We started the discussion by reminding the participants that we were there to adopt a plan of action. A plan of action that then, after being adopted, give us the possibility to have a very fluid and a very interesting and relevant discussion. I think that obviously you have talked about jobs and about labor in many of the other assemblies, but we had a specific perspective maybe on jobs, employment and labor-related issue. And we particularly wanted to focus on the new forms of exploitation of workers. And we said that exploitation exists, of course, and has always existed, but the forms of exploitation that used to exist before the pandemic have actually been even more present, and a lot of workers that were exploited are still exploited. A lot of the collective agreements that used to exist have not been renewed and have not been renegotiated, and this has led to a lot of workers being even more exploited, particularly by large companies whose headquarters are often away from Europe. We've also said that there is a demonization of workers and a difficulty to achieve agreements at sectoral level. This is where agreements have most impact, and we need agreements not at company level, but at sectoral level. And unfortunately, we know that a lot of the employers want local company-based agreements only in order to limit the rights that workers have. We also denounced the Uberization of the economy. I hope you understand that term, and we think that it's not just that Uber, one company, is using workers in an acceptable manner. A lot of other companies are now using the same processes, using algorithms and artificial intelligence to use workers and abuse them. We also said, we touched another topic. We said that there is a racialization, sorry for the term, but a racialization of poverty. And we know that many people are now working from home. We know that in many of our countries, basic jobs, essential jobs, are now given out to migrants. The cleaning of our cities, the care of our sick and elderly is now mostly entrusted to badly paid migrant workers. badly represented workers also, very much in a difficult situation in terms of their ability to defend their rights. And then we've also insisted on another dimension. Trade unions have got to become closer to the poor, also closer to youth, and to maybe use the words that I've just heard from another member, we need to be able to really bring together our organizations. There are many trade unions out there. You're usually very close to them, but we need this relationship to really take shape and lead to concrete actions. I think we have a very dark future ahead of us, but if we can work together closely with trade unions, then hopefully we can find ways to improve and hopefully have a better future, and not the dark one that many of us are afraid of, I think. And then I want to finish off by just mentioning a few points. One important aspect is we talked about many things, but one in particular is that we have what the ETUC, the European Trade Union Confederation, calls the social protocol. That social protocol is an interesting instrument. It's something that we should look into more. It's something that we should work on. This social protocol is something that was that has been very, very important for many workers, and we hope that we can continue looking at the social protocol and how to implement it. We are now looking at possibly doing more than just a simple social protocol. We are now talking about the need for a social contract, a new social contract. A social contract that would allow workers to move away from the current situation. Just like the former social contract just after the Second World War allowed workers to move away from the consequences of the Second World War, we need a new social contract for the 21st century so that we can move away from the difficulties that many workers face today. And then one more point. This is a bit of a challenge I want to throw to the organizer here. The organizers, we need to organize possibly some sort of training course to talk about the various ways trade unions work, operate, and organize themselves in Europe only. We often talk about trade unions, even within trade unions, without even understanding how other trade unions are operating. We know that the Nordic trade unions, the Southern trade unions, or the Eastern trade unions are very different organizations, and a bit of training would be very useful there to make sure that we all understand exactly what trade unions do and how they operate. Okay, thank you very much, Enrique. And I think indeed it's important to maybe look at possibly using some of the foundations that are here to support that sort of training course. Why not? I think to finish off, we need, normally we should read the final declaration, but don't be afraid, because you have received a text already, so I don't think I need to read it aloud. I just want to focus maybe on some aspects of that text and some important elements of that document. This forum has been a forum of consolidation, first and foremost. I think we've had the chance to meet and to welcome here many important actors of our world, of our parties, and I think many of us, of course, understand that we are facing a period of crisis. There's a health crisis, there's an economic crisis, and other crises that make it absolutely essential for us to work together and to unite our forces so that we can move towards a truly social, a more democratic Europe. And we need policies that will allow us to deal with the current climate crisis that we're facing. We've also insisted on, or made a diagnosis the crisis is mostly affecting the popular or the workers class, the working class, sorry. We need to make sure that something is done to ensure that Europe is becoming gradually more social, more equal, and of course that it is able to not only meet the global climate challenge that it faces, but that the whole world faces. We also insisted on the fact that instead of spending money on weapons, we should use that money to establish a better world within the framework of the United Nations, and we need to get rid of some of the blockades that exist, particularly the one against Cuba. We also insisted on the fact that some actions that are taking place today are having an impact on the whole world, and a negative one on that. And we need to deal with that. We need a just transition model that allows us to move away from the current economic situation towards something better. We need to move towards a model which is not only, I would say, a model that exploits the weakest and the most vulnerable. We need also more gender equality, and a plan is necessary to achieve that and to guarantee the rights of women as the rights of migrants as well. We can't speak about democracy if women cannot live freely, without violence, without macho violence, and without having their body used as a commodity. This declaration, together with the work that we've done in the various assemblies, I think is a very useful document that we can use to truly send a message to the world and explain again that we are all involved and we're willing to act. This declaration would not be complete if it was not accompanied by a plan of action. And I think with the various reports that we've heard now from the various assemblies, we have got this plan of action, and hopefully we can use it to build something between now and the next forum, and hopefully by that time the crisis or the COVID crisis will be behind us. I think that the main actions that we need to take into account here and to promote are: one, promoting true mobilizations on April the 7th, ask for free universal vaccination. We need to participate also to all the mobilizations organized by trade unions, particularly on May the 1st, for the defense of workers' rights. We need also to participate to the Peace Summit, which will take place in Madrid in June 2022, in parallel with the NATO summit. We need to work together to put pressure politically and socially so that the COP of November 2020 really allows us to make progress in our fight against the climate crisis. We also need to campaign to guarantee that a minimum of 2% of our GDP be dedicated to culture, and also to establish a truly European artist status. 3 more points. We need to promote a campaign and fight the crisis of democracy and the increase of fascist attitudes across Europe. We also need a campaign against the extreme right that is trying to question the rights acquired by women for many years and are criminalizing feminism. And then finally, we need to better understand the impact that the pandemic is having on wages and labor relations in Europe. These are the main elements of this plan of action. And this is a short and quick summary of the declaration. And on those words, I'd like to say that I'm happy that we have done an excellent work. You have done an excellent work. And I'd like, on behalf of the organizers, to thank also first and foremost the interpreters who've been with us and supporting our work. Thank you very much. We also want to thank the staff here of the Tricoterie for their welcome. Thank you also to our technical team and to the organizing team. We've been able to deal with all the technical problems and all the practical problems we have had to face, and there have been many of them. And fantastic job from all of them. Thank you also to the staff here of the European Left Brussels office and everybody who's contributed to organizing this event, politically speaking. And of course, thank you to all the leaders, political leaders, trade union leaders, and everybody else who's been with us. And I think we have clearly demonstrated that we want to work together, we're able to work together. We want to deal with the main crisis that we're facing, certainly, which is the climate crisis, but we're also able to show something else, which is our ability to agree and to work together. And I think we now have everything we need to make 2020 a better year, a year of fighting, a year of campaigning, and a year of hope based on this joint, or this work that we feel we can do together now. So I'd like, and I hope we'll all be busy, active in the coming months. I hope this forum will be followed next year by a fully presential forum with everybody able to attend physically. I think this physical, dimension is essential in a forum like this one. We're going to have dinner now. I hope the discussion, and I'm sure the discussions will continue. So enjoy your evening, and thank you very much for your contribution and your participation, and see you next year.